Unfortunately, Iran has consistently rebuffed our approach. And I think that Russia has been a very strong partner in saying that it has no interest in bringing down Iranian society or the Iranian government, but it does have an interest, as we all do, in making sure that each country is following its international obligations. The second way in which I think the START Treaty has influenced our discussions about Iran is it sent a strong signal that the United States and Iran, or the United States and Russia, are following our own obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that our interest in Iran or North Korea or any other country following the NPT is not based on singling out any one country, but rather sends a strong signal that all of us have an obligation, each country has an obligation to follow the rules of the road internationally to ensure a more secure future for our children and our grandchildren. And so I think the fact that we are signing this treaty, the fact that we are willing as the two leading nuclear powers to continually work on reducing our own arsenals, I think should indicate the fact that we are willing to be bound by our obligations, and we're not asking any other countries to do anything different, but simply to follow the rules of the road that have been set forth and have helped to maintain at least a lack of the use of nuclear weapons over the last several decades, despite obviously the Cold War. And the concern that I have in particular, a concern that I think is the most profound security threat to the United States, is that with further proliferation of nuclear weapons, with states obtaining nuclear weapons and potentially using them to blackmail other countries, or potentially not securing them effectively or passing them on to terrorist organizations, that we could find ourselves in a world in which not only state actors but also potentially non-state actors are in possession of nuclear weapons, and even if they don't use them, would then be in a position to terrorize the world community. That's why this issue is so important, and that's why we are going to be pushing very hard to make sure that both smart and strong sanctions end up being in place soon, to send a signal to Iran and other countries that this is an issue that the international community takes seriously.
Let's ask ourselves a question. What do we need sanctions for? Do we need them to enjoy the very fact of reprising, imposing reprisals against another state? Or is the objective another one? I am confident that all those present here will say that we need sanctions in order to prompt one or another individual or state to behave properly, behave within the framework of international law while complying with the obligations assumed. Therefore, when we are speaking about sanctions, I cannot disagree with what has just been said, and this has been the position of the Russian Federation from the very outset. If we are to speak about sanctions, although they are not always successful, those sanctions should be smart sanctions that are capable of producing proper behavior on the part of the relevant sides. And what sort of sanctions should we need? Today we have had a very open-minded, frank and straightforward manner discussed what can be done and what cannot be done. And let me put it straightforward, I have outlined our limits for such sanctions, our understanding of these sanctions, and I said that in making decisions like that, I, as President of the Russian Federation, will proceed from two premises. First, we need to prompt Iran to behave properly, and secondly, least but not least, to maintain the national interest of our countries. So smart sanctions should be able to motivate certain parties to behave properly, and I'm confident that our teams that will be engaged in consultations will continue discussing this issue. Vladimir Kondratiev, NTV. Now everyone is concerned whether the treaty will be ratified by the parliaments. You have mentioned that you will be working with the parliamentarians to achieve such ratification. Let me ask you, what difficulty do you see along this road, and how do you assess the chances for success? The question is addressed to both presidents. Well, by all appearances, Barack believes that we might have more problems with ratification. Perhaps that's true, but let me say what I think about this question. Of course, such agreements of major importance, international agreements under our constitution and our legislation, are subject to ratification by our parliaments. And, of course, for our part, we intend to proceed promptly and to do all the necessary procedures to ensure that our parliament, our State Duma, starts reviewing this treaty, discussing this treaty. I will proceed from the following. I believe that we have to ensure the synchronization of ratification process so that neither party feels in one way or another compromised. Earlier we had periods when one state ratified and while another party said, sorry, the situation has changed, therefore we cannot do. So this is something we have to avoid. That's why I say we have to proceed simultaneously in the conditions of an open-minded and straightforward discussion with subsequent ratification by our parliaments. That's what we need, and we will not be found amiss in that regard.
You know, the United States Senate has the obligation of reviewing any treaty and ultimately ratifying it. Fortunately, there is a strong history of bipartisanship when it comes to the evaluation of international treaties, particularly arms control treaties. And so I have already engaged in consultation with the chairman of the relevant committees in the United States Senate. We are going to broaden that consultation now that this treaty has been signed. My understanding is that both in Russia and the United States it's going to be posted on the internet, appropriate to a 21st century treaty. And so people, not only within government, but also the general public, will be able to review in a open and transparent fashion what it is that we've agreed to. I think what they will discover is that this is a well-crafted treaty that meets the interests of both countries, that meets the interests of the world in the United States and Russia, reducing its nuclear arsenals and setting the stage for potentially further reductions in the future. And so I'm actually quite confident that Democrats and Republicans in the United States Senate, having reviewed this, will see that the United States has preserved its core national security interests, that it is maintaining a safe and secure and effective nuclear deterrent, but that we are beginning to once again move forward, leaving the Cold War behind to address new challenges in new ways. And I think the START Treaty represents an important first step in that direction, and I feel confident that we are going to be able to get it ratified. All right? Thank you very much, everybody.
Спасибо. До встречи.
Thank you. See you next time.